Hi, and welcome to Schmooze with Suze. I'm Suze Montgomery, your host, and I can't remember how long we've been doing this, but we've been doing it a very long time, and we're really happy you have us in your home tonight. I've got a really interesting guest. I've known Lynn, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years. We kind of bounce off of each other from time to time in town, but I've always been a huge fan of her work. So I thought it was time that we brought her in and interviewed her so you can see and she can tell you the story of her work, which is most unusual. And I'm fascinated by your medium. You do sculpting. And what, in metal?
I sculpt in clay.
Okay.
And then I make a mold and it comes out in bronze.
Now this is a whole process, correct?
Yeah.
Why don't we start at the beginning? So where did you grow up?
LA.
Oh, you're an LA kid. Okay.
I went to UCLA, and then after I had children, I did a graduate program, a second bachelor's, a graduate program at CSUN.
Okay, and always art.
No, my original degree was in elementary education.
Okay, so you decided to get a real job first.
I just couldn't do that. Actually, by the time I had 3 children, I didn't want to spend the day in the classroom and then come home to be the kind of mother my mother had been, which was a little distracted. It's a hard thing to teach all day and then come home. So I didn't want to do that. And I had a yellow bowl in my mind that my art teacher in 4th grade had helped me make on the potter's wheel.
Really?
And I wanted to do that, you know, I guess I was in my late 20s by that time. And so I took lessons and then finally went back and got a second bachelor's in ceramics and a master's in ceramic sculpture.
Wow. And so do you do any ceramics now?
Mostly for teaching. I've done right along. I taught at Moore Park College for 24 years and at Cal Lutheran for 10. So it was in teaching ceramics. So yeah, I love clay. I really, really love clay. And I love the potter's wheel. But at some point in my re-education, I just decided I didn't want to make pots all the time. And I took a trip to Japan and saw the master. He was a living national treasure of Japan, Soji Hamada. He was paddling the bottoms of his cups. These were teacups that sold for $3,000 in the department store in Tokyo. But I had been looking for a way to extend my contact with the clay farther from my brain. And the paddles that he was using allowed me to do that. And
now, paddles are a piece of equipment?
It's a piece of wood in all kinds of different shapes. I came home from Japan and carved my own paddles. It was an important part of the idea of the way that I work is with the knowledge that the clay, inert and unformed, will become something from my energy, from the way I approach it, from the way I engage with it. So the paddle let me engage with it from a distance. and this is kind of really a surrealist idea, that the material has its own ability to become form. And the artist then impacts the material without, directing the material, asking the material to take its shape. And that's how those sculptures are made.
So this is part of your creative process, to just
process.
allow it to take shape by itself.
Yeah, I
rather
allow it,
than
and then I discover what shape it takes. So my excitement, my thrill is in what is happening in the clay, and then I decide, what I'll keep and what I won't keep, and what I'll work with and enhance, and what I will eliminate.
That's a true artist concept, though.
I love it. It's been a wonderful way to work. Rather than the tight, controlled, I need this to do this, I don't do that. I'm loving this clay, I'm loving this moment, I'm loving this paddle.
So you let the clay speak to you.
The clay tells me where it's going.
That's pretty elevated, intelligent thinking. I mean, because most potters that I've met in the past, and I've known quite a few, they always have something in mind that they're going to do. So they they don't go through the creative process. It's like, I've got to create this. And so I would think that's rather limiting. Yours seems to be a creative flow of process.
It just is exciting. It's exciting. I see something happen that has never happened before. I make the decision that I love it, I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to do other things that will work with it. And so it's all a matter of discovery. It's an exciting way to work.
I can remember when you came to town. Mm-hmm. This was years ago. And I remember seeing your work, and it was at the Artist Union Gallery for the first time I ever saw yours. Now, there's other art galleries, and there's other avenues, and like there's Bell Arts, and there's the small little workshops inside. There's a lot more Vita Art Center. There's a lot more art here now than it was when you first came here. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really, and this environment really is a great place to create process here. But at that time, it was very limited. And I remember when the Artists Union Gallery, they liked to be known as more freedom. They liked the freedom. It wasn't like the Ventura Art Gallery, which is over on, on Santa Clara.
Yeah.
That seems to be a certain type of art, and it seems to be, it's not kinetic. It doesn't really flow for me. I mean, I like the free expression of what you did, because your figures, they're free-flowing. To me, they're free-flowing. I mean, it's expressive of the way you just described your process.
Yeah. So I actually found the Artists Union just a little bit limiting for me.
And that time it was avant-garde.
Because the way that they worked, and this is something I already knew I couldn't really do, they would set a theme, and then the artist would create something for that theme.
Correct.
And that did not register with me.
Well, that wouldn't work with you because you're so free.
Because what had happened to me was that the idea that I was trying to allow my work to express was very, very strongly implanted in me by the time I got here. I'd already been, when I finished graduate school, I worked with a Native American medicine man. I was an apprentice, and I worked with him for 10 years. And then I led the ceremonies, Suze, the purification lodges, the vision quests, and prayer dances for many years, for over 20 years. I led these ceremonies.
Know that.
So when I came here, I was already established in myself and in my work as needing to express an idea through my work. So what I was asking my work to show me was the feminine in celebration of itself. That's what I was looking for. And the reason I was looking for that was that in the lodges that I led, very often, and I was leading between 2 and 4, 5, 6 lodges a month for a way wide distribution of people in Southern California. Women in those lodges were praying and weeping often about their issues around abuse. So that issue came to me through this praying in the low willow structure of the Native American sweat lodge. Women praying because they had been abused. And
inherent within the culture.
each one of them their own story, but for me it opened up this door of what are we doing? What is happening? What is happening to women in our culture? And how and the distress in the women was often what is my life? Who am I? What can I do now? You know, this kind of really sharp cut off from their own trajectory by what had happened to them. So that became a very big issue for me. In fact, my Native American teacher was telling us that our job in life was to develop our minds, to develop our bodies, to recognize the teaching of our emotions, to know that there was something bigger than we are, some sort of a spiritual reality to what life is, and engage in our sexuality as our teacher and our means of celebrating life. So that was my work that I was doing with my teacher in this Native American transformational ceremony environment. But over here were these women praying in the lodge about abuse. So I took that, kind of anxiety, the pain of that, into my studio. And the sculpture became an antidote. For me, the sculpture became an antidote. What would it be? Who would the woman be if she were celebrating herself through her sexuality?
I can totally see that happening. It evolved. Mm-hmm. And you expressed it through your work. Mm-hmm. Your work is so beautiful because it's simplistic, but it's complex. I don't know how to describe it better than that, but it flows. Yeah. I mean, I love the flowing aspects of it, and they're just, all the figures are beautiful. I mean, beautiful. I'm glad that you brought them with you today so we can see them at home.
Sampling.
And so now you have a studio where you're living now. Are you able to create there?
I'm still writing the book.
Okay. Now let's talk about your book. Because you have multi-talent as far as right brain.
So before I left the studio, I was on Ventura Avenue, 1317 for...
Yeah, I used to drive by every day.
What was it, 12 years or 14?
Long time.
Maybe.
Like rust building, rust-colored building. Right.
Yeah, the flags are still up. I didn't take down my...
I noticed, I saw them today. Do you want to take them down? I'll take them down. I see them every day.
So, but before I left the studio, I had already made the decision. I'd been working on this book since 1989. That is, making notes for it and some attempts to actually get it started. Mm-hmm. But about almost 4 years ago, I made a decision that it wasn't going to happen if I kept it on the back burner. It had to come out and be the main thing I was working on.
Did you put away your sculpting at that time, or you continue to do it?
I haven't worked in clay seriously for about 3 years.
Okay, so because you were focusing...
Not that I feel it's over.
You're focusing on another medium, though.
I have done another whole body of work that's about what is love. But the ones on reclaiming the sacred source, the sacred feminine, I decided about maybe 3 years ago that I had finished that series. I'd been working on it for what, 15 or 16 years, something like
Wow.
that, 17 years.
That's a long
and
time.
I decided that any more of that was going to be redundant. And that I'd actually said what I wanted to say through the sculpture. But that the book had to be a companion to the sculpture. So that's what I've been doing.
Autobiographical?
No. It's about the sacredness of sexuality.
Okay, so you're just expanding on.
I'm putting into a form what I have discovered is the history of the interference with women's access to their sexuality, and the reason for the trauma that women have been, experience. So that's what the book is. It's my working title has been Orgasm, a Sacrament. I'm working with an editor now. He thinks I have to soften that a little bit, so I don't know what the title is actually going to be, but I finished writing in January.
Well, it's intriguing.
Well, it is the subject of the book. That is the subject.
Then maybe not.
I don't know whether I'm going to change
If you're
the
that
title.
passionate about keeping it, hey, there's maybe a reason for that.
Yeah, I'll have
So,
to.
but you're done with the book now, right?
I finished writing it, but I am in the rewrite, working with an editor to get rid of the repetition and, make it actually. My struggle with the editor is around this, how blatant I'm going to be on the. I started out for me, the first chapter was, sexuality it creates the power of who we are, and so we have to. Anyway, he wants me to put that later in the book. So I've had a big
So you
struggle
can
with
lead them
the
through instead of putting.
He thinks it's from the perspective of people within the writing world and publishing world. He feels it's too shocking.
Well, we're pretty much of a puritanical society. I mean, it's always been that way, but that's one of those things. When I was a kid, my mother she couldn't even say the word sex, so she would spell it.
Yeah.
And she would go, "Oh, it's SEX," and
Yeah.
I'm like, I was confused. I was a teenager. And as you're a young teenager, like 13, you're going through all these changes with your body and your mind and your hormones. And I remember walking in the door one day after school, my mother goes, "Oh, you're at that age. Here's a book. Go to your room and read it."
Yeah.
And I'm going, "Okay, and I came back out and I said, 'Can I ask questions?' She goes, 'Nope. We'll bring you to the doctor and he'll answer questions.' So she brings me to this doctor. The guy had, if I was about, maybe I was 13 or 14. So the doctor at that time was probably in his 60s. And I walk in there and I go, I'm not going to ask him questions like that. This guy doesn't know anything about that. He's old. Now, you just, as a mind, the kid's thinking. This is a kid's thinking. And then again, you scroll forward to, it's really interesting. So you go through this whole period of you're trying to find out. Then you go through the whole period of, okay, that's what it's all about. Then you get a little bit deeper into it and go, wow, that's pretty cool. And then you finally get to the last stage, which my students are, age 85 to 107, and they are absolutely free. Their favorite subjects are like sex. Now nobody's doing anything, mind you, but they're asking questions. Mm-hmm. And now they're free to talk about it with each other. And
that's
I guess,
shame.
Yeah, I know. They've been repressed all these years. And so to me, as a child of the 60s, I mean, this is what we did. This is the way we lived. When we were in college, it was the big sexual revolution. And I couldn't come home and talk to my mother about it because my mother, SEX, we're not talking about that. And then she gets pregnant at age 48.
Wow.
Oh, that was the big shocker of the year. So I come home from college and my mother looks at me and she goes, I got news for you. And I'm going, oh God, what is it? One of these things. And she goes, I'm pregnant. Now I'm sitting next to my boyfriend from college. He came to the same, meeting out in the backyard. And I look at him and I go, oh my God, they still do it, right? You're absolutely shocked to think of your mother having a baby at age 48. My dad was 60. So this was a little shocking.
Was it a live birth?
It was.
Wow.
He's like, there's 20 years between us all. And by far, he is the best of all four of us. He is amazing. He's nothing short of amazing. He's a great guy, and he's extremely intelligent. Owns a drug company. He's doing fine. But it was that time of repression, and and I went to Catholic schools. I had Jesuits. Nobody talked about sex in Jesuit schools.
So I think that's criminal. Now I think that's criminal.
Well, now looking back at it, yes.
And that because you don't get started at age 13 with an idea of this as a gift, as something that will apply to your ability to celebrate life,
absolutely,
bring you pleasure.
It's the continuum of life. And it's a very important piece of the continuum of life. We don't just chunk it out and forget it, because it is to be celebrated. I mean, I get that now at age 69. I mean, I got it earlier than that, but I look at it at that time, the repression, it was not discussed. I mean, it was like in whispers.
So our parents and their parents and their parents before them, all of that kind of silence and repression.
Correct.
Which I think leads to the trauma that the women in my lodges were experiencing. That is what my study has been about, and what I've discovered, was that 5,000 years ago there was an invasion. So there is there's a moment to go back to in history where the goddess worshippers had been around for 20 or 30,000 years. I mean, it was an obvious reality to have a goddess as the center of the culture, because those people were thinking about growing their society, and birth was a sacred act and a mysterious reality, and so the goddess was a natural center of the religious life, of the life of the people, because new life was so essential. But what happened 5,000 years ago was the invasion of the Indo-Europeans that came over the Caucasus from the steppes of Russia. They came with weapons and horses and armor, and they were bigger people. They were meat eaters, so they were bigger people, and they overran the societies that had been worshiping the goddess. And in overrunning them, eventually, and determining that they would be in charge. Oh, they brought a god with them, by the way. They brought the god they had derived from the volcanoes around where they had been developing. They determined that they were going to be in charge, and so they wiped out the goddess worshiping cultures. And in order to, and the remnants that didn't, would not be suppressed, they continued to, find ways to keep the goddess worshiping from re-entering. So it was, there was a lot of energy about.
So that's where it began.
About the goddess energy re-entering, because it had been, the way of life for 20 or 30,000 years. The goddess was worshipped in the temple with sacred sexuality. So sacred, the orgasm was the way of celebrating the divine for the goddess worshippers. The way of suppressing them was to incriminate the women for their sexuality.
And you saw this reflected in the women that you worked with in these tribal nations?
I see it in the way that women are in life. I think women generally, and in our culture, as much as we point to the Middle East as women being suppressed, but in our culture as well, all of us had puritanical parents. you know, and the idea of sexuality as a sacred gift to be honored and harvested for its ability to empower us, that's lost on our culture as well.
Well, it's necessary for the continuum of man or woman.
Beyond that, way beyond that. I mean, that's what our religions tell us. You can be sexual because you got to procreate. But beyond that, to be fully who we are in our lives.
And embrace yourself.
And have the power to celebrate our own energy. That's what our sexuality is for us individually.
And this will be in your book?
That's what my book is about.
Okay, we're running out of time, but I gotta ask you, I got carried away too, because I love the story, but I love your relating, it's a different perspective. I was reading a piece today about our the early civilizations in Europe, and they were women, and the warriors were women. They just found a grave of someone apparently, and it was on Smithsonian today. It was fascinating. I'll share that with you later. But I want to know about your sculptures. Now you sell your sculptures, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Is it going? Can we put your website up so that people can purchase?
Yes.
Okay. And you're
they'll
local.
have to purchase through me.
Correct. And you're local.
I am local.
Okay. Because I want to make sure you get those out there.
There's that image of my sculpture garden that I gave Rich.
Okay.
Which I've just instituted. Many of my sculptures are in the garden. It's wonderful. You've got to come by and see it.
I've got to, definitely. Yeah. I have sculptures in my garden at home too. I just recently started buying art for my yard. That's my happy place lately. Besides the kitchen is where my kitchen is my zen. That's where I go away. And when I start cooking, I mean, I just go to a different place like you do. But my yard now, because of politics are so crazy, I don't have a weed in my yard because I've been, every once in a while when the politics start to strangle me and I get so pissed off at the TV and throw my house slipper against the TV screen, you know what I mean? And then I just go out in the backyard and I start pulling weeds and my garden looks like Better Homes and Gardens. It looks pretty damn good. Okay, I'm going to definitely come over to your yard and share you. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it and got to know you better. So now I can hang out with you more after all these years.
I hope you'll come by.
I will come by, I promise. You just got to give me the address. And thanks for joining us. I mean, I learn something new every day, and I think that's the secret to life, to continuing to learn. And if you don't stop, if you stop learning, you might as well just roll over and die. My 85-year-olds will tell you that. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.